experiences that she has had as a war bride. Am I right?
Yep.
Okay. So, go for it.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. I thought probably you'd all had enough of me by now. I've lived here a long time. Well, my name is Jo Hartmann, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you today. And thank you for inviting me. How many of you are from Sturgis? Originally? Oh my God. How many of you have lived here all your lives?
Well, off and on.
Oh, still a goodly sprinkle in there. Yeah. How many of you have ever been in a war, a flood, a blizzard, a lawsuit, a murder? Just about everybody here. Yeah. Oh, good. We got some common ground to build on then. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and a book I'm currently completing called Flying on a Wing and a Prayer. Do any of you have a pilot's license? No, I don't either. And this isn't a book about flying. It's about an ordinary person, me, who's been both blessed and cursed with an ordinary life, lived in the middle of some extraordinary circumstances. Many of us kind of wobble through our days, accumulating multiple dings and bangs, and we wind up like an aircraft sometimes, emerging from an ongoing battle and flying with one wing and lots of prayers to get us through. Hence the title. I'm from England originally. I don't have a speech defect. People think I do something. I speak the Queen's English. So probably have a background somewhat different from yours. While many American children want to be rock stars or the president, I, on a different path, steeped in 1,000 years of royal history, as a little girl, decided I wanted to be the Queen. Okay? As I grew older, I discovered the job was already taken, unfortunately, and had to readjust my plans. Teaching sounded like a pretty good idea to me. Raised in a Catholic girls' school where the teaching nuns were only a small step down from the Queen, in my opinion. Fate wove its web around me, though, and before I could become a teacher, I found myself on the way to the United States. I thought that the Statue of Liberty was speaking to me, though. Give me your tired, your poor, was obviously referring to teachers, right? While your huddled masses yearning to breathe free must be talking about the children in the classrooms. So I was well on my way. Not exactly Mark Twain's Yankee in King Arthur's court, but Joe the Brit in a Yankee court. But a little about where I started from. The British Isles is actually 4 countries: England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. I belong to the England part. I grew up on the east coast of England. That's the part that's closest to France. It was just about 80 miles across the English Channel to get to the continent. And just 5 minutes walk from the golden beaches on the coast of England and the chilly North Sea. My home is called Great Yarmouth. It's situated at the mouth of the River Yare, Y-A-R-E, which flows through what are called, strangely enough, the Norfolk Broads. That doesn't mean women, that means a broad expanse of flat land and water. The Broads are actually 30 connected lakes, connected by navigable channels, providing about 200 miles for boating and fishing. My hometown is actually right on the coast of England and is well known as a busy summer resort with its sandy shoreline. It's also the home of extensive deep-sea fishing and prospers with several frozen food packaging businesses. The fishing fleet used to sail into the harbor in September and stay until January, following the herring. It has several historic sites, including a stone wall with watchtowers, where the city guards would stand watch against the raiding ships from the European continent in medieval times. It's the location of the book David Copperfield and the summer homes of Charles Dickens and also Anna Sewell, who wrote Black Beauty. There are many historic buildings in and around the city. Many of the older buildings are constructed of stones washed up on the beach. There actually remains part of an old stone town wall that initially surrounded the city, complete with towers, where the residents could see any incoming invaders. You can also see the ruins of many old windmills scattered around the county, which is very flat. And most of the early towns in Great Britain did indeed have walls around them with watchtowers to keep them safe from the invaders, whoever they might be, and they always had guards on top of them keeping watch. Also, believe it or not, on the outskirts of my hometown, there is an old Roman camp, now a village called Caister, C-A-I-S-T-E-R, from the Roman word castra, which means camp. When I was in high school, we were allowed to help in the excavation of the camp. That activity involved digging in the dirt with fingernail-sized tools and sifting the small scoops through coarse netting. Never discovering anything other than seashells and bugs, I soon got tired of that. Besides, I didn't like dirt under my fingernails. And that is basically my sketchy history of the area. Great Britain is a beautiful land. I don't know how many of you have ever been there, but when you fly over it coming from the US, it pops up out of the ocean as a brilliant, brilliant green. Lots of grass and trees. Probably some mold too, because it does rain a lot. There is a lengthy history to the land. Stonehenge is an early site that boasted an organized civilization run by priests called Druids that preceded even the Roman invasion. You may have heard of a queen called Boadicea, sometimes called Boudica, who came from the part of England that I come from, the East Coast. She had flaming red hair, incidentally, and led the ancient Brits in successfully pushing back the Romans from the eastern parts of England. She had a chariot with killer knives lashed to the wheels and would charge through the Roman legions at full tilt, ripping the unfortunate soldiers to shreds as she led her army to victory. The British Isles have suffered frequent invasions in addition to the various areas fighting against each other in ancient times. It is indeed a very green and pleasant land, fertile and productive, with lots of low hills and valleys and some plains. Lots of varieties of wildflowers can be found in the countryside. The climate is mild, if somewhat damp. English people are born with an umbrella attached to their right hand, but it rarely snows and it is a temperate zone, between 40 and 70 degrees most of the time. I was born in 1939 and lived through World War II with some vivid memories remaining. My own childhood memories are a mixture of horrific and hilarious. For the most part, my early recollections are not too pleasant. Air raid sirens, bombs, rationing, deprivation, and hunger were our daily companions in war-torn England. My dad had moved my mother and me from London into a small rural town outside the city, and I fondly remember the beautiful English countryside with its perpetually green rolling fields. Its carpets of clover and cowslips, daffodils, bluebells, and primroses, and its acres of thick forest that I enjoyed as a child. One strange thing I do recall is that the open fields around the village were decked with rows of sewer pipes aligned vertically in clusters to mimic heavy anti-aircraft artillery or ACAT guns of a non-existent defense erected to fool the enemy flying overhead. It was better than nothing, I suppose, and stark evidence of England's unpreparedness for war and the desperate ingenuity of the common people. One Christmas season is etched unforgettably in my little girl memories. There were very few silent nights in those days. As we lay in bed listening with dread, the enemy bombers constantly droned in the darkness overhead on their way to incinerate London. The ponderous monsters would drop garlands of shredded tinfoil to confuse the radar, and almost every morning that strange, shiny, sinister stuff festooned the rural landscape where we lived in fear beneath the direct flight path of airborne destruction. But war or no war, the festive season was upon us. We had a Christmas tree. I have no idea where it came from, but nothing to put on it or under it. Ever eager for diversion, toddlers and older children would run across the meadows at daybreak, gathering up and tossing around the glittering debris of war to brighten our drab lives as the bombers lumbered home. I visualized a glorious sparkling tree at the center of our vast grayness as I stooped to gather up the mysterious shredded silver magic rained down on us from on high. On our recurring morning adventure, enemy fighter planes would frequently appear out of nowhere, screaming down from the clouds to accompany the slower bombers home. The Nazi pilots, in some sort of gruesome game, would swoop down and strafe whatever they happened to see in the English countryside: buses, trains, cars, cows, dogs, people, and yes, children too. A group of kids running across a field was too tempting a target, apparently. They hit a couple of us and we went down in a howling mess of blood and silver tinfoil. I took a glancing bullet in my 3-year-old back, but lived to tell about it, although the details are very hazy. After I spent a day in the local hospital emergency room, I was unceremoniously hustled out to make space for the many, many more serious casualties of war. My mother and I stayed with my great aunt, close to the medical facility. My entrepreneurial, widowed Auntie Hester had a tiny grocery store in her home, which was in a row of attached houses. My mom was visiting my grandmother, who lived close by, while I convalesced in Auntie Hetty's back room. Suddenly, at twilight, the air raid siren screeched, and my great-aunt pushed me under a government-issued bomb shelter, a large steel and reinforced table-like edifice in the dining room. It was called a Morrison or an Anderson shelter. Through the mist of time, I don't recall which name it bore. My aunt scrambled after me, not making it completely into the safety of the shelter. An elderly customer tried to scuttle in too. I don't know what the enemy was aiming for, but the home next door took a direct hit, and Aunt Hetty's humble grocery store in her 2-story row house came tumbling down on top of us. My great-aunt suffered a fractured hip, and the unfortunate woman who was in her store at the time didn't make it into the shelter and was flattened and killed. I started to cry and gulped in brick dust and smoke, almost choking. We were buried for a day and a half. A dead body, a toddler with a bullet wound, and a woman with a broken hip. I was entombed in rubble and choked on dust as I lay miserably in the darkness, sobbing for my mother as my injured back throbbed, and I contemplated the desperate plight we were in. I kept hearing a voice telling me that everything would be all right. I didn't know who it was: my aunt, the air raid wardens, the volunteer firemen digging for survivors, the neighbors, or God himself. "Get up, little girl," the voice kept telling me. I wiggled and struggled and clawed at the disaster around me, tearing my fingernails to the quick, and was finally able to move myself around somewhat, as the shelter had taken the brunt of the heavy wreckage. In retrospect, I know that those were the words that Jesus had spoken to Jairus' daughter, the girl at the point of death, whom he was called to heal. "Talitha cumi," he said, which translates to "Maiden, arise," or in the common vernacular, "Get up, little girl." I like to tell myself that maybe he thought I might be worth saving too, and had given me his encouraging message. Those words have echoed in my head on several occasions over the years. "Get up, little girl." It was a dusty and memorable pair that was ultimately exhumed, coughing and gasping, but again, I survived. Mercifully, memory can recover quickly, glossing over what is too painful to recall, a self-protective mechanism, I believe. And I really don't recall a great deal about those grim 36 hours, except that now I believe it was a real-life miracle that saved me for some purpose. My adventures in America as both a student, a teacher, and a school administrator form the basis of my life's narrative. I've encountered floods, blizzards, and other obstacles in my journey besides bombs, but I believe that I emerged as a stronger person with stronger faith. My encounters with students taught me many, many lessons. If they learned anything from me, well, that remains to be seen. I'm a great believer in education as the key to a nation's success, and the children I encountered on my life's journey confirm that belief with solid evidence. I never would have made it through the jungle of America's schools without my faith and a heavenly shoulder to lean on. So, how did I manage to get to America? I met and married my husband. He was in the Air Force, and I actually ran into him in the pouring rain and knocked him over. So, I think I married him out of guilt. That's not true. Okay, well, my trip to America, I decided on that trip that Christopher Columbus went too far. My airplane ticket was on El Al, which is an Israeli airline. Most of the passengers spoke little English, so I made no friends on that trip. When we arrived in U.S. airspace, we were informed that Idlewild, is now Kennedy Airport, was closed for some reason. Times don't change much, do they? We would have to land in Baltimore, and I would consequently miss my flight to North Dakota after sitting on the tarmac in 100-degree weather for 3 hours. There were no customs facilities in the city at that time, so we couldn't even get off the plane. This hot, uncomfortable, "Welcome to America, Josephine," was not the greeting I had anticipated. I had visualized flying past the Statue of Liberty with her inscription of "Give me your tired, your poor," from the poem The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus. I knew she was talking to me because I wanted to be a teacher and had no illusions about the financial disadvantages of such a career. When we finally arrived in New York, I deplaned and tried to sort out the shambles of my trip. Next flight to North Dakota was the following afternoon. What to do in the meantime? I sent a cable to my husband, which he has never received to this day, and one to his sister, telling her of the delayed arrival. Then I gathered up my luggage and headed for a cab. I'd never seen electric eye doors before, so I backed up to the glass monsters in the entrance, trying to juggle my baggage and open the doors with my behind. Alas, the doors beat me to it, and I tumbled out onto the hot New York sidewalk in a pile of luggage and bad temper. A shuttle bus driver spotted my distress and came to my rescue. He picked me up and dusted me off, saying, "Get up, young lady," and asking where I was going. "North Dakota," I told him, and he laughed. "Well, I don't go that far." "Would you like to go to a hotel?" I guess that was as good a suggestion as any, and hoped this wasn't some kind of colonial kidnapping scheme. It wasn't. The guy helped me check in and asked if I would like to drive around on his route for a while and look at America. He fed me, he showed me parts of the great city, and dropped me off safe and sound at the hotel. Then the next morning, he and his 2 young daughters, who wanted to meet the English lady, came and picked me up in the shuttle and made sure I arrived at the right terminal. Angels don't always have wings, I discovered. I arrived safely at my final destination with no further disasters. It was October, and the North Dakota prairie stretched for hundreds of miles, brown and parched. Used to lush green English countryside, I was quite disturbed. I felt as if I were landing on the moon as I descended from the plane with the 90-degree heat wave slapping me in the face. A goodly contingent of my husband's family awaited my arrival at the Bismarck Airport. I'm an only child. My hubby is one of 12 children, 10 of them older and 1 younger than he is, so there was quite a crowd there. That was pretty intimidating. I was terrified, but I knew my husband had squirreled away enough money to send me back to England if our marriage dissolved in disaster. So I knew there was a safety net of sorts. God help me to get through this, I prayed. Make them like me and bring my husband here safe and sound, and soon. We wound up living on his brother's farm, and I was totally unprepared to live on a farm. I knew nothing about farming, having lived in cities all my life. I knew the feeling of concrete or sandy beaches under my feet, and there were neither where I was headed. The only agrarian experience I had had in England was limited to gutting herring as an after-school job and a brief stint with turkeys. My naval grandfather on my dad's side had raised turkeys in a small holding he rented, known nowadays as a community garden, I guess. I thought turkeys were the stupidest creatures I had ever encountered. They would sit on their roosts and let the rats gnaw at their throats and stomachs to get the grain. Then they would commence feeding again, and the grain would run out of their necks. I would have to stitch them up with a needle and thread so they didn't starve to death. And you've heard the saying, too dumb to come in from the rain? Well, that's a domesticated turkey. They would stand outside in one of Britain's frequent torrential downpours and look up at the sky while the raindrops ran down their nostrils and they drowned. I was happy to discover that wild turkeys in the thickly wooded hills area around our current home are somewhat smarter. My husband's family welcomed me warmly and made a place for me within the ranks of his parents, 11 brothers and sisters and their extended family. However, with only my herring and turkey experiences to guide me, I discovered that I really did not like being pecked by chickens, shoveling out pig pens, milking cows, or living 20 miles from the closest library. My career as a very bad farm wife lasted only a year. I soon persuaded my husband to enroll in a technical college and move to a town on the other side of the state. After 2 years, he earned his associate degree with the help of the GI Bill, and I worked in the school cafeteria, wiping off tables and emptying the garbage, until I graduated to the cash register. I also took some college evening classes, which I loved. The music department discovered I could sing, and after featuring me in several concerts, sent me to try out for the Metropolitan Opera competition in the Minneapolis region. It was both exciting and terrifying. The opera panelists decided I had the voice, but was too young and experienced for their cast. They told me to come back the next year, which I never did. Thank goodness for a divine hand in that adventure. Based on my brief experience in the crowded city, I fear I would have been more out of place in New York than I was in tiny town North Dakota. During those 2 years, I did, however, discover that I loved to learn and that I wanted to know. I would indeed become a teacher. I frequently recall Jesus surrounded by children saying, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven." And I believed I heard his voice calling me across the years, saying, "Get up, little girl." I wasn't meant to be an opera star or a farmer. I was meant to learn as much as I could and help shape as many young lives as I was able to reach. While I have indeed suffered a few children, I have loved many more of them and pray for them nightly, hoping they live righteous and fulfilling lives, and I have tried to serve as an example. I'm going to back up a little bit here. The British Isles is actually 4 countries. I think I mentioned that. England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. I belong to the England part. I grew up on the eastern coast of England, just a 5-minute walk from the Golden Beaches. My hometown is called Great Yarmouth. It's at the mouth of the River Yare, which flows through what are called the Norfolk Broads. That doesn't mean a bunch of women, it means there's a lot of flat lake and marsh surface there. The Broads are actually 30 connected lakes, connected by navigable channels, providing about 200 miles for boating and fishing. My hometown is actually right on the coast of England and is well known as a busy summer resort with its sandy shoreline. It's also the home of extensive deep sea fishing and prospers with several frozen food packaging business. The fishing fleet used to sail in the harbor in September and stay until January, following the herring. It has several historic sites, including a stone wall with watchtowers where the city guards would stand watch against raiding ships from the European continent. Many of the older buildings are constructed of stones washed up on the beach, and there are actually remains of an old stone town wall. And, as I mentioned before, there is a village called Caister, from the Roman word castra, which means camp. And I helped excavate some of the remaining souvenirs. I have a book here that talks a little bit about the area that I'm from, and if you'll bear with me, I'd like to read you just a little bit about it, because it is an interesting part. It's flat as a pancake. There are no hills, just flat. A lot of marshland, rivers, lakes. Within it's kind of a triangle. One of the bigger towns you may have heard of is Norwich, and then there's Lowestoft and Sea Pauling, and then there are 30 lakes scattered around. And together with linked rivers, lakes, streams, and man-made waterways, they provide about 200 miles for sailing and motorboat cruising. It was long believed that the formation of the Broads was the freakish aftermath of glacial action, but research during the past 20 years has established that most of these shallow lakes and their tributaries were man-made diggings from peat or turf, an activity recalled in the village name of Barton Turf. And that's peat was what they used to burn. There weren't any trees around there, so they would dig up this dry grass stuff and burn that in their fireplaces. Peat is no longer widely used on fires, but a revival in thatching. You know, on those colleges, they have those straw, those reed roofs on them. That's renewed the demand for reeds, which is another product of the Norfolk Broads. For long stretches, the waterways are actually below the level of the flat countryside, and you can often see what looks like a flock of sails drifting across a field. You can't see the boat underneath it. All you can see is the sails, the sailboats. The real character of the Broads can be appreciated only from a boat, and craft can be hired. A day trip can be made, and the Broad that I used to like very much was called Hickling Broad. It's part of a nature reserve and is noted for its wild variety of bird life, and you can see spoonbills in the summer. The Bure, which is one of the main rivers there, and its tributaries thread most of the lakes together. The Yare, which is another river there, carries cargo and pleasure boats into the heart of the largest city in the area, which is Norwich. Norwich is spelled, basically meaning the North Town. Small craft can go through the yacht marina on the River Wensum. There are fine windmills you can still see in the area, and something called the smock mill that's shaped like an old smock, you know, that sort of baggy dress you wear. And it's still in working order. Some other towns around there, my own hometown is Great Yarmouth. Yarmouth meaning the mouth of the River Yare, which flows into the ocean at that place. And it's a busy summer resort, and it also prospers from frozen food packaging and from its various supply services to the North Sea gas drilling rigs, which are in the North Sea between England and the continent. There are a couple of fairgrounds and 2 piers. It's got a quay, it's got several museums, and a lot of interesting building. It even had cobbled streets in some areas with the stones, you know. Don't ride your bicycle across that. It's a painful experience. But there's really so little left of the old town that the Yarmouth scenes in the 1969 film version of David Copperfield, if you've ever seen that, had to be shot in a different town to achieve an authentic atmosphere. The neighboring town, 3 miles to the north, is called Caister-on-Sea, with also an extensive sandy shore and the ruins of a 15th century moated castle of Sir John Falstaff, who appears in Shakespeare's play Henry VI. The castle has a museum nowadays of veteran and vintage cars. Another interesting town is Horning. This is a village in the middle of woodland with private inlets from the River Bure leading to miniature Venetian canals up to attractive houses and gardens. That's where the rich people live. I didn't live there, needless to say. Hoveton, 2 miles west, has a nature trail which is open during the summer only. Wroxham is another community there. Lowestoft is another coastal town, and the Germans bombed the heck out of that during the Second World War. And it has, its lifeboat station was founded in 1801, 23 years before the Royal National Lifeboat Institution came into being. Potter Heigham is another town that's around there. It doesn't have much. It has a little village with shops, a supermarket, and a whole bunch of sheds where people pull their boats in during the winter and kind of leave them there. Reedham is another town, Rollesby, that's got a Norman church dating from 1200. And let's see, West Somerton, that's just surrounded by marsh, but it still has a bunch of windmill pumps there that are kind of interesting. So that's basically what my town is about and what it is known for: herring and sunburn. So, yes,
What did your dad do?
he was an electrician.
Okay, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember.
Worried about me mostly, I think.
How often have you gotten to go back?
I used to go back like every couple of years while my folks were alive, but since they passed away, I haven't been back. So, I know it's all different. I don't
But
even,
they stayed in that same?
yes, so I don't even speak the same language anymore.
What were the windmills used for?
Grinding grain. You know, they have a big grindstone at the bottom, and then they have one that's that way, that is on wooden spokes, and as the windmills turn, that grindstone moves round and round and grinds the grain. So there's still some around. I don't think they use them for that anymore. They're more like a tourist trap kind of place, as are a lot of things anymore. Nobody has any more questions? Yes,
How did you end up in South Dakota?
just luck. I married my husband. He was in the United States Air Force, and he's from North Dakota.
Right.
And we kind of slithered down, so following gravity, I guess. Yeah.
Do you have family at all? Jo,
Do I have family? I have some cousins.
in
Yeah.
England?
I have some cousins who tend to ignore me. I'm the black sheep of the family.
Why is that? Just
Because I left.
Yeah.
You know,
Go
English
America.
people are very proud. They think there's no place like England, but I thought there was.
We're glad you did.
Well, I am too. It's been a very happy life.
Are those windmills the same as the ones in Belgium, Holland?
Yes, yes, they are. They're, very large, very
Yes, okay.
imposing, yeah. I always think of Don Quixote every time I see one, charging the windmills on his horse with his lance, thinking they're giants. Yeah. Yes,
I just want to say what a wonderful education you gave me while we worked all those years together in the flower shop.
oh, well, bless your heart, thank you.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did have a lot of
We
fun.
worked hard.
And you did my flowers, I was the first wedding that you did.
I remember that.
Yeah,
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 uh-huh,
thank you.
yeah, that was fun.
I wanted to ask about your teaching career.
About my teaching career,
I was your student in Deadwood.
I remember that.
I think that was very special. I remembered your English accent and beautiful voice. And
Well, thank you. I thought you were going to tell me, and I wished our paths had never crossed.
I was hoping I wasn't one of those you said there were some some that you remember and some that you didn't want to.
Sorrow.
I remember you. Matter of fact, I see there's probably a couple of teachers in here. I remember most of my students, which is kind of surprising. I'm an old lady now, and a lot of them I don't recognize anymore. Not because I don't remember them, but because they look so different. So,
How long did you run that flower shop? And was it in back of that? Some of us were talking one time, we've
we
even
were
forgotten.
up in Henry and Wally's, and then we had a place downtown.
That's right.
Between two bars.
Yeah.
Well, nothing changes, does it?
How long did we have that?
I still laugh about one Valentine's Day, and these guys, you know, come staggering out of the bar, and of course we're open late because it's Valentine's Day, and they came in, and this one guy, I mean, we're trying to close the door, and Josephine and I were digging stuff out of the garbage to try to make him a bouquet to take home to his wife.
Yes. Yes. And how long did we have that? 4 years?
Well, I don't remember.
5 years, something like that. Yeah. That was fun. I enjoyed that.
And nobody liked to do roses, so I always got to do roses.
That's because that's kind of prickly.
Joe, how old were you when you came over here?
19.
Oh my gosh. Had you ever been out of the country before?
Yes.
You had been.
Yes, I've been to France and Germany and Italy.
How old were you when you knocked your husband down?
When I knocked him down,
Or ran into him?
17.
17.
Yeah.
Good shot.
Swept him off his feet.
So you didn't get to come over with him, you had to come separately?
Mm-hmm. Well, what the deal was, he didn't plan that, but we planned on coming back together, and then there was some dust up in the Middle East or something, and he got his tour of duty extended. So I had to come back by myself, and then he followed several months later.
So you lived with his family then?
But I was with his family, yeah, his brother,
For all those
his
months?
brother, yeah. He thought I was a little strange.
So when you first came over, he wasn't here then?
No. Mm-mm. Uncle Sam pulled him back.
Oh, that really would have been an adventure.
It was scary, but that was okay. I survived.
So Joe, how old were you when you became a naturalized citizen?
Oh, gosh. That took me a long time. I wasn't sure I wanted to give up my English citizenship. You know, and lots of countries let you have dual citizenship. The United States won't.
They do now, though.
Didn't then.
I know, but I was surprised. I have my brother-in-law's brother that lives in France, has lived there for many years, and he has dual.
Mm-hmm.
And his daughter, because she's American
Mhm.
citizen, she has dual. And I said, I didn't think you could do that. I don't know when it changed.
No, I don't either.
Mm-mm.
I don't either. But that's the way it was then.
I knew it used to be that way.
So how old were you?
When I came over?
No,
19.
when you were when you
When
became
I
an
was
American.
naturalized, gosh, I don't remember. That's been about 20 years ago. But it took me a long time to make up my mind that I wanted to divest myself of my English citizenship. And I watch television these days, and I wonder if they'll take me back. So.
I don't know if you remember, but you were in a parade in Midwood,
Mm-hmm.
and you had a lattice top blouse on, and it was so hot that she was burned wherever.
I did. I
Where
had
was
a
it
crocheted sunburn.
All the holes were red.
That was funny. I remember that. Yeah, that was funny. Yeah.
How many years were you an educator?
Oh. Gosh, when I was 26 and I was, gosh, it's Must be 50 years.
Wow. Well, you hung it out there a lot.
Yeah.
You saw a lot of things change in those 50 years.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it was fun. There were very few days that I would want to divest myself of. For the most part, it was a really gratifying experience. I've known some wonderful students. Wonderful students.
Are you totally retired now?
Yes. Sort of.
She's writing a book.
I'm
Once
writing a
once
book.
a teacher, always a teacher.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty active in our church because we're without a priest right now, so I get to perform once a week. Write a sermon.
How far along are you in the book?
How long?
How far along are you in?
I've got it written, I'm trying to edit it, you know, and I have mixed feelings, I scratch something out and then I'll think about it and I say, no, I want that back in. So
Yeah.
it takes a while. It's like cutting fingernails on your firstborn child and you accidentally cut a finger off.
Did you get any of your teaching education in England?
No,
Or you didn't?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
no.
Because I remember when I was starting college, we had to go take our ACT test in Spearfish, and I lived on a ranch 100 miles away. And you were there taking yours,
Mm-hmm.
so you must have started in Spearfish the same time I did.
Yeah. And I did have some credits for England,
Did you?
and they wouldn't transfer.
Yeah.
So that's one thing about American exceptionalism. You think nobody's as good as we are.
It sounds like.
Anything else? I can sing the Star Spangled Banner if you want.
Go for it.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
It's been